Public Access Television. I'm Susan Kessel.
And I'm Randy West.
Yes, welcome. Welcome. So, we're here to talk about the Fairfield Arts and Convention Center, which is home to the Stephen Sondheim Center for Performing Arts.
We didn't warn you that we were going to do close-ups. That's right.
So, we are very excited. The Fairfield Arts and Convention Board, which Randy has been a part of for 2.5 years, and we've gotten to know Randy really well, seen him work on many projects, got to know his very wonderful talents, multi-talents, and we have hired him as our executive director. We couldn't be more thrilled, and it couldn't have been an easier decision after seeing all of his talents over the last 2.5 years. And he's right here in Fairfield.
I was saying it's amazing. I was talking about, somebody was asking me about when the Sondheim Center is open, and we're founding a professional musical theater company, and, will we still be doing community things? And I said, of course we'll be doing community things. But I said, when we tried to found a professional touring musical theater company last year, where we auditioned people all over Iowa, half of the company came out of Fairfield. I mean, so it's really surprising for a small town, the level of talent that we have here. And I think that, so not only, obviously, that's sweet that you say that I was here, but I'm always amazed of the depth of talent of this whole town in almost any need you seem to have. You can probably find somebody in Fairfield that has that talent.
There are. And Fairfield's been known forever for being a very cultural community way back in the day.
Oh, absolutely.
It just continues, and that's why it's so important that this facility be built and that we get it up and going to promote and showcase all of our community talents.
Well, I tell you, I couldn't be more thrilled. It's as you know, it's a huge challenge. There's a lot of work to get done, and we're just about to start holding public meetings to allow the community to get complete access to us, to be able to talk to us about how you want to use the building. We have not only the Stephen Sondheim Center, which is a 520 to 30 seat theater. It's kind of bouncing around between 520 and 530 each week, over 500 for sure. And then there's I keep calling it the exhibition hall, and Andy Nelson, who is our dedicated marketing person here, wants it called the Business Pavilion. So it's a big building is what it is that can do a variety of things, from car shows to it certainly could hold comedians, could hold bands, could do teddy bear shows, could do almost anything. It's a huge big doors at both ends, and anything you can roll in there you can set up for any kind of a festival. We also have an art gallery. Mm-hmm. We also have an art facility that will be appropriate for creating art, and we have meeting rooms, and all of that under the auspices of the Fairfield Arts and Convention Center. So one of the first things we want to do is we're right now trying to figure out how are we going to administer that building, and we certainly are going to have a way to rent it to a corporate or professional entity. If there's a company that their business is doing events and they want to come in and simply rent the facility, there'll be a way for them to access the building. Then there will be a non-profit version of that, which will be for people that aren't corporations necessarily, that are doing an event that is controlled by a non-profit organization. And then we're going to have a third way, which really is kind of a certain amount of projects we'll choose to participate with the organization. And we'll gamble a little bit on the rent and take some money in the back end from the sale of tickets or the donation at the door. So we're kind of working out all those numbers and exactly how that'll work. I mean, we know that it's important for us to have a facility that's accessible to the community. And so one of the first things we're going to do is we're holding open meetings on March 7th and 20th at the library meeting room.
The Fairfield Public Library in the meeting room.
and that's at 7,
7?
and we'll go until we get done.
Okay.
And anybody who wants to come, you can come as an individual if you just have questions about the facility or about how it's going to work. You can certainly come representing an organization if you know for sure that your organization has events or weekly or monthly meetings, anything that possibly could fit in our facility. This will give you a chance to come ask any questions, tell us what's the best way we can interface with you. And I guess I can't promise that we'll be able to do it exactly the way everybody wants it, but we'll try. I mean, we'll certainly
Yes.
sit down and listen to the input. We're doing these 2 meetings intentionally to give a chance for the community to get access to us, have questions answered. We'll bring copies of the blueprint. We'll be able to talk about the building. We're also starting to offer tours much more often. I'm doing a tour tomorrow on Saturday. We're really very willing, both Andy and I, and Jeff Northridge, bless his heart, gives tours. Call us at 472-2000 if you or your organization would like to see the facility. It's pretty impressive. I mean, it's a wonderful building, and it's looking more and more interesting on the outside now, but it's really pretty exciting on the inside, and we're just delighted to have the opportunity to show groups of people what the inside of the building looks like. So call us, and we'd be happy to, show you firsthand what's going on at the construction site.
Yes. When we started to design the project, we did a lot of public input. We did the programming. We asked everyone to come tell us their needs and what they wanted. But oh my goodness, that's been, I think, 7 years ago the first time, and then we did it again probably another 5 years ago. So it's been a long time. There have been a lot of changes, value engineering things.
That's a very fancy way of saying that we had to make some choices about the building to just make sure that we could afford to build it.
Exactly. So now we're coming back, and we want the public's input too. Please try and come if you have an interest in using the facility, and we hope you do.
It's also, I mean, it's like I've heard all of us say, really, that the board has been working for 7 years with the community trying to build a building, and now we're in a 6 to 8 month period of time trying to figure out how to program a building. And so that's a different entity. We've been building, now we need to figure out how can we best run the building. I mean, obviously it's a building that needs to break even and support itself, but also support the community. And that's one of the reasons that we will be doing a program of acts that we bring in from out of town. We'll be bringing in artists from throughout the Midwest and nationally, whether or not, and we're going to be holding meetings for that kind of input in about a month, where if you want to come to a public meeting and talk to us about, whether or not you have an interest in folk music or bluegrass or rock music, or whether or not you like dance, you like ballet, or you like folk dance, or if you're interested in comedians, if you're interested in a lecture series. Now, once again, we can't promise that we can program for everybody, certainly in the first year, but before we go out and start looking for who we're going to bring to Fairfield, we want to make sure that they're at least in an area of interest that the public really wants to attend. Now, that's also one of the ways that we're going to pay for the building, so we can then make the building available to the community groups. We're also founding the Stephen Sondheim Center. They're founding Iowa's first equity, which means professional, musical theater company. That there are other companies that do a musical every now and then of the 4 union companies in Iowa, but there isn't one company that specializes in musical theater, and we've chosen to take that as the niche that we think we can fulfill. Musical theater is also the best-selling art form right now in the United States, so it also, from a marketing perspective, it works. But the other thing is, we're a 520 or 30-seat theater. We can't compete with Hampshire or Des Moines in terms of, what last weekend there was the Producers at one theater and there was Phantom of the Opera at the other theater. Neither of those shows would really fit in our theater. And I mean that from the perspective of, even if we could figure out a way to take the technical package, which Phantom of the Opera has a huge technical package. I mean, a lot of fly lines. You've got to be able to really have support a big piece of musical theater. I'm not sure it would fit technically in our performing space, but even if we could make that work, with 520 seats, we couldn't get enough people in to watch it to make it pay for itself. So we decided to not try to do that. I mean, we might book an occasional middle-sized musical, but we felt that if all we were doing was booking touring shows for musical theater, that we wouldn't be able to compete with the A-class shows that are coming into Hampshire and Des Moines. But we thought if we actually created a professional company and created our own work, that we could be competitive. Because Fairfield, as you well know, is a wonderful place to live, but there's only 11 to 12,000 of us here, and in order to make this facility work, we have to do a certain amount of programming that's going to draw from Cedar Rapids and Iowa City and all the way around to the Quad Cities and up to Des Moines. And so part of the design of the Sondheim Center is to do programming that is either exclusive, which means that the only place you can see it is in Fairfield. And then we also, kind of going back to the days of Spade, we're going to do a certain amount of program where we bring in celebrities and we mix celebrities into the musicals that we do. And then certainly, going back to what I was saying earlier, we're trying to build this company under what's called a Civic Light Opera contract, which means we'll be able to hire celebrities, we'll be able to bring in professional performers from LA and New York, we'll be able to bring down professional people from Chicago and around the Midwest, but we can also mix them with non-union paid people from Iowa and from Fairfield, and we can mix them with volunteers, so that it really is still open for anybody.
That's exactly what Sid Spade used to do with the
Right.
Parsons days that many of you remember. And someone told me recently that Sid Spade is a lot like you and had so many connections. That's how he made it work.
Well, another just kind of fun thing is I've been guest lecturing at University of Iowa and Central College and Southeastern College and Indian Hills College, and I have good friends now also at Wesleyan, and nobody's specifically teaching musical theater right now. So all of these colleges and universities want to send interns and students. They want to offer extension programs through what we're doing and offer units to people here that might want to study through what we're doing. So that's another part of what we really want to found is not only just a performing arts experience, but an educational experience.
Yes.
So that people that want to learn how to do musical theater or do technical theater related to that or play in our pit orchestras or really have that experience, they can gain experience here where obviously it's funny because I've been the creative director at Hawthorne, which I'm dearly going to miss, and I'm still going to be connected to Hawthorne. But part of that was directing their television projects, their television commercials. And I would bump into talent, very fine Midwest talent, that would say, should I go to LA because there's more television possibilities there? And I would say, well, in the Midwest, you're going to audition for something and you're probably going to be up against 5 people. In Hollywood, you'd be up against 500 people. So the chance to have, in this case, musical theater or a professional theater, and I directed the last 2 musicals for the old Creamery up in the Yamanis, and they have a nice little 320-seat theater, but it's not, they do fine work there, but our theater technically will be an exciting place to do lighting and sound and design. We really have a theater that will allow for very exciting technical packages. And there aren't a lot of designers in Iowa right now because I've tried to find them. And you go to the universities and they have fine designers, but they're pretty much booked at the university because there hasn't been a lot of work. If you had talents and you trained, you left Iowa. You just kind of had to go. And we're now going to have an opportunity for people that want to build skills in any of these areas to build skills that will be the same skills as will be required anywhere in the United States. So you can build skills here, and then when you have a resume and you've done a certain amount of good work, you can then go try New York or try Los Angeles if that's what you really want to do with your life. So it's a real exciting chance with an open opportunity for people to be involved. Somebody also asked, solely about volunteers. Well, believe me, a facility like this is dependent on volunteers. That's another set of open meetings that we're going to be holding in about a month, trying to talk to people about if they want to volunteer everything from ushering at events to helping us manage business pavilion events to watching over the art gallery events. To literally being on running crews when we're doing shows, to being in shows. There really is a huge opportunity for involvement, and that's going to be more and more apparent as we move toward opening the building.
Yes. Another exciting thing is that we're looking at is workshopping shows here.
That's what I was talking about, the exclusivity, is that the musical theater in its day, they used to put a show together in New York, and then they would go on the road, and they would go to Philadelphia, and they'd go to Chicago, and they'd go to Boston, and they'd take 6 to 8 months really working a show until they got the bugs worked out of it, and then they'd go back into New York. Well, musicals have become so expensive that they don't do that anymore. That what happens is when they start to put together a musical, they'll find 2 or 3 theaters that are regional theaters that they believe in the quality of the production that's done there, and they go to, for example, they'll book the La Jolla Playhouse, which I was telling a story on myself. I actually choreographed the first production at the La Jolla Playhouse. They did Oliver, and at that point it was called the La Jolla Civic Light Opera, and then 2 years later it became the La Jolla Playhouse. I did this production of Oliver, and the kid, Christian Hoff, who played Oliver when I did the show, is now the second lead in Jersey Boys, and he's a full-grown, I think 30-year-old guy, which maybe 28, but which is kind of a sad story for a director. But they would go to, right now, the La Jolla Playhouse supposedly has just fixed a new version of The Wiz, which is supposed to be wonderful. And once it gets the kinks worked out of it to where it really, they think that it's Broadway worthy, it's supposed to go to Broadway. Wicked workshopped in Canada, and then came to San Francisco, and then finally went back into New York. Well, we want to try to be part of that. We want to be a theater that people that are creating new musical theater would come here and use our facility and our people and create, whether or not we would be the last stop before it goes right to New York, or whether or not we would be the first time that they put something together. But that kind of exclusivity, we can begin to have all of the variety, all of the national theater publications take notice of us because we're working with people that have New York credentials, that it is on a path to New York, and that will be the kind of program that I believe that the people that like musical theater in the Midwest would choose to come here, because we would have playwrights, composers, lyricists that are with Broadway credits, and many times it's actually the creators that can get this to happen. Nathan Lane, workshopped Bounce 3 times before it finally did the big production that was up in Chicago. And Sondheim was Nathan Lane was the person that he wanted, and he just said, "Would you come workshop this with me?" George Firth was very successful when I did his one-woman musical. He literally called me and said, "I can get Judith Ivey to come up to San Francisco if you can find a theater for 3 weeks and find the time to direct her." And so many times they already have some talent attached to it that they want to also workshop out of town. So it's kind of sometimes it's a great package that you get a whole show with a very creative group, and you get maybe a talent that also helps sell tickets.
So, talking about all those and all those names you're dropping.
Sorry.
No, that's a part of why this is going to work. You have so many connections, but how did you get all these connections? Where did you start? How did you know you were interested in theater? What did you...
I have been incredibly lucky. I mean that I when I was in the 8th grade, at that time I was in marching band. My best friend and I both played drums, and I was singing in church choir, and I'd done some just little school play things. But my dad was the baseball coach in our town, and I grew up in a baseball family, and I did play baseball in high school and college. But I mean, it wasn't like my mom had a degree in dance from
Okay.
college, which was kind of the other thing. But they came in, a community production came into the junior high school band looking for boys that could play an instrument to be in the finale of The Music Man that they were doing. And my best friend said, well, I'll do it if you'll do it. And I said, fine, I'll do it if you want to do it. So we volunteered, and we went. When they got us down there, they found out that both of us could also sing. And so they actually moved us into the chorus for all the ensembles. So like we did Iowa Stubborn and Trouble and 76 trombones. We got to be.
Very familiar to those of us in Fairfield.
That's right. The good Meredith Wilson, Iowan.
Yes.
But and it was the most fun I'd ever had in my life. I mean, I just fell in love.
So did you know then that that's what you wanted to do?
Yeah. I knew when I went in as a freshman in high school, I was so theater crazed that the Thespian Society, you had to do so much work, earn so many points. I was the first person to ever have earned enough points in the first semester of their freshman year to be inducted into the Thespian Society.
I understand. I decided when I was 5 I wanted to be an artist. That's all I ever wanted to be. And when I was in high school, I took like 3 hours of art a day, something they probably wouldn't let you do nowadays. But yeah, the passion.
And somewhere along when I was my freshman year, a group of us put together the little garage theater, and I directed completely illegally a ripped-off production of You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. And I taught it to my friends, and we went around to the schools and performed this little version of You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, which was the first thing that I ever directed. And then up through this what ended up being our senior year, we had a really fine performing arts program at the small high school that I went to. And
where was this?
Hemet, California.
Okay.
And my senior year, they decided to not do a musical, that they did a big musical every year, and the performing arts faculty decided that they wanted to do one every other year. And this was the only year they did this. They decided that our senior year, by the next year.
So what did you do?
Well, so I was the president of our chamber singers, and I was the vice president of the Thespian Society at the time. So we all got together. It was like, Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland. We said, well, what if we put on our own show? Would you support us in terms of putting on our own show? And the teachers all said, well, yeah, fine, if you want to. So a friend of mine, his father owned a business that made mobile homes. Made prefab homes. So his dad's business built the set, and my dad controlled the gym. So I got the gym, and I wrote a show called A Salute to the Swinging Years, and it was about the first night that we heard back about the Battle of the Midway, which was the first World War II battle that we really won once we were in the war. And so I set this all up, and we pulled music from the period, and Hemet had a great jazz band, and our whole jazz band came in and played 40s music and then accompanied the stuff that we did. We did arrangements, and then I wrote the dialogue, we picked the music, a couple of us choreographed stuff, and I had no business doing it. I had no training at all
This is as a senior in high school.
Yeah, and I worked, I had wonderful performing arts teachers in high school, so just from watching them do what they did, I just mocked them. And we put this whole show together, all students. It sold out for 4 nights in the gymnasium, and the University of Redlands, which was a performing arts university that was really building its musical theater program at the time. The head of the department, heard that a whole bunch of kids put on their own musical, and Paul Little, who's a lifelong friend of mine, came to see that show, and afterwards he came up and he said, I think you should come to the University of Redlands. We're building a musical theater program there. So I went to the University of Redlands, and I actually, my Bachelor of Arts degree is in musical theater, that I actually studied theater in the theater department. I studied music in the music department, and I studied dance in the dance department. So I still to this day both direct and choreograph, and I can do for Music Most Foul, which we're doing with Fact out at the Country Club the first 2 weeks of March. I'm conducting. And so
You're conducting
yeah,
too. Oh my goodness.
I actually, it's fun. I've actually conducted probably 10 musicals over the course of the year. I conducted Into the Woods, which is a very complicated Sondheim score, but I knew I was going to do that. I was actually doing the Arizona premiere of Follies, which is another Sondheim show, and it literally has the conductor book that you conduct out of, which is a big reduction of the score. Most musicals have a big conductor book. Follies has a conductor book for Act 1 and a conductor book for Act 2. It's just the music stops twice all evening, and we were doing it for 4 weekends in Phoenix, and delightful guy was musically directing, and he was the principal timpaniist for the Phoenix Symphony, and he had to do a mostly Mozart concert in Sedona one weekend. And he said, well, Randy, this is so complicated that I don't think anybody can conduct this but you, because it's all tied to dialogue. It's not just like doing numbers. It was all this very complicated underscoring that required knowing the show. And I said, well, I'll try. I said, I don't know, this is really hard. And he said, no, it's a union orchestra. They'll be in there the second weekend. They'll be fine. And so and the band actually sat on stage, and so I came in to start, and once we started, we went for 20 minutes straight. There's no break. You just go and go and go. And I stopped, and the oboist leaned forward, and she said, "You're doing very well." And I said, "Thank you." She said, "There's no color in your face, and we're all very concerned, but you're doing very well."
This guy is a ball of energy, and sometimes it's like, oh.
So we went again for another 20 minutes without a break, and when we got done, trombones, they have those squirt bottles that they squirt on their slides. They passed this bottle up, and they go, "We'd all feel a lot better if you'd squirt yourself in the face." I said, "Why?" "We think you're going to keel over."
We've seen you at meetings where we think you're going to keel over.
So I did survive, but that's the hardest thing I've ever conducted.
Oh.
But anyway, so I went to the University of Redlands. Gary Krinke was the head of the musical theater program there, and still to this day, one of the most talented musical theater directors. I'd love to get Gary out to do something for the Sondheim Center.
So you went from high school, awesome, out of this world, to Redlands, then...
At Redlands, it was for my junior directing project. I wrote the book and the lyrics to A Time Out of Rhyme, which is the musical that we're doing this summer in the Family Summer Musical Program, which is a program that we're founding. You're going to be hearing a lot about it starting in the next week or so. There'll be registration in March, and we'll start, the auditions are at the very end of March. It's March 31st and April 1st. We're auditioning in both Ottumwa and Fairfield, and then we're performing the last weekend in June at the new Bridgeview Theater in Ottumwa, because the Sondheim Center is not open. But it's co-produced between the Sondheim Center as part of our community outreach and GOVAP, which is the Greater Ottumwa Vocal Arts Project, which my beloved wife, Margaret Clare, conducts. And it's a 60-voice children's choir. We're the co-sponsor, the co-producers, and then the sponsors, our co-sponsors, who are also very involved in the project, are Indian Hills Community College, the Fairfield Art Association, the Fairfield
Cultural
Alliance, the Ottumwa High School Thespian Society, the Bridgeview Center, and the Ottumwa Greater Arts Council. So a whole big group of arts.
Talk about a large group of community, an area community coming together. This is just the beginning of what's going to happen.
So I wrote A Time on a Rhyme, and then
Which won a
it did
film
it.
award,
Well, it,
Iowa Film
it just
Award.
last year won Best Unproduced Screenplay at the Iowa Motion Picture
Yes.
Awards, and that year it won Best Play in the Western Regional Playwright Contest. So when it was originally written, it won an award for Best Play on the college level, and I did it, and I was allowed to direct main stage, my own piece, my junior year in college, which had only happened one time before with Dave Lee. Directed main stage his junior and senior year, and David Lee went on to write for Cheers, and then he produced Wings and wrote and directed, and then he also created Frasier and wrote and directed Frasier, and actually won 6 years in a row the Emmy as a writer, then director, then writer, then director, then writer and director, and really wonderful, nice guy. He had done it before I got there, and then when I got there, there was a couple of years where nobody directed main stage as an undergraduate. Then I was asked to direct as an undergraduate. My junior year, I did Time on a Rhyme, and my senior year, I did The Wizard of Oz. And I always joked that, you know, everybody else's honors project was Death of a Salesman, and
Oh, yes.
I was doing Wizard of Oz. But I was also heavily mentored by Gary Krinke in both of those productions. I mean, I just had a great. I'm a huge fan of the mentoring system as a way to really learn an art form, so I did that, and then. When I graduated, Gary left the University of Redlands, and he went to Fullerton College, and they did a big national search, and I honestly, to this day, don't know what happened, but I was going to go teach high school at Santa Cruz High School. I'd been offered a job. That's what I thought I was going to do. And then in June, they called and asked me if I would stay at the University of Redlands and take Gary's position and teach the musical theater courses for the university. So I went right out of college and taught at the University of Redlands. I inherited a touring musical theater program, which toured. So I did that, and then I directed the musicals for the university, and then I taught their musical theater classes, and I actually did that for 3 years. And then when I left, I went to the City of Phoenix, and I was the City of Phoenix theater coordinator for 5 years. And there I ran 2 theaters, a small theater and a larger theater, and then a building that was used for meetings and classes. And so that was kind of where I first learned how to run 3 buildings and administer and book buildings and run a facility. And so I was very fortunate during the 5 years I was there to do that. And then what happened was, when I was first moving to Phoenix, I had a group of college students that I had taught that were in New York, and they were seeing shows, and they knew that I had done my master's work on Stephen Sondheim. And if you took a class with me, I talked a lot about Stephen Sondheim. And for those of you that don't know, the mini scoop on Stephen Sondheim is he wrote the lyrics to West Side Story, he wrote the lyrics to Gypsy, and he wrote the music and lyrics to A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, Company, Follies, A Little Night Music, Sweeney Todd, Sunday in the Park with George, Into the Woods, Passion, Pacific Overtures, Assassins, Bounce. He wrote the musical numbers to Dick Tracy, for which he won the Academy Award for Sooner or Later, and he's won more Tonys, Oscars, and he won a Pulitzer Prize for Sunday in the Park with George. So he's the most awarded living lyricist composer, and I've been a huge fan of his forever. And when I was going to move to Phoenix, a group of my students were in New York. They took it upon themselves to contact Steve's office and say, when we were in college, we took a class from this assistant professor who was crazed and burned incense at your altar, and he's moving to Phoenix where he doesn't know anybody, and is it possible you'd do something for his birthday? And Sondheim thought it was just amusing enough that he called them at their hotel room and said, okay, what is this all about? And they talked to him. And 2 days before my birthday, I still have it in my office, on embossed stationery, came this little handwritten note that said, happy birthday to Randy West from Steve Sondheim, and the date of my birthday. And on my birthday, the phone rang and I answered it, and this very nice man, said, "Hello, is this Randy West?" And I said, "Yes." He says, "Hi, this is Steve Sondheim." And I said, "I can't even make up a reason why you would be calling me." And he said, "Well, it's your birthday." I said, "No, I know the birthday part. It's the Steve Sondheim part that I don't exactly understand." And he said, he talked about the students, and he said that they made a point of how important his work was to me. So we got to talking, and I said at that point, West Side Story, Gypsy, Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, and I think Company had been done in Arizona, but the bulk of his work hadn't been done. And I said, "I'd love to bring your work to Arizona." And he said, "Well, here's my contact information. If you're going to do it, let me know if there's anything I can do to help." So every time I did a Sondheim thing, I would get a hold of him, and he quite often gave me material that nobody else had, or he always gave me something that was press worthy. And what ended up being my last year in Phoenix, I was doing an all premiere season, and I'd done the original version of Merrily We Roll Along, but it had been redone at the La Jolla Playhouse and radically rewritten. And so I got a hold of Steve and I said, "I'm doing this premiere season. Your original Merrily did really well for me, but it's been redone so much." Also, being the shrewd marketer that I was, I knew that if I could get that, nobody else had it. I mean, it was not available anywhere. And I said, if I could do the new version of Merrily, that would be a premiere, and that would be really exciting. And he said, "Well, it's not available. I mean, but I will send you my personal handwritten manuscripts if George first says it's okay to do the new book. Here's George's home phone number. Give him a call." So I called George, and George said, "Well, let's talk about it." And we talked, and then it went back and forth for about 2 weeks. And then they called me and said, "If we can come to Phoenix and make your production a workshop production, really work the work, you can do it." And I said, "Well, this is Phoenix. We're not New York. We're not LA." And they said, "We want to go where it's not about producers, where it's not about the money, where it's really about the creative work, where we can really work the musical." And I said, "Well, God, I'd be delighted to get to help." And 6 months before I was supposed to do it, I got a phone call from George saying, "Aren't you doing Merrily in January?" And I said, "Well, I hope so." And he said, "Well, when can you come to Hollywood?" And I said, "Well, when do you want me?" And he said, "Well, how about Monday?" So I went to George's house. And
for those that might not know, George Firth is?
He's the playwright who wrote the book to Company. He wrote the book to Merrily We Roll Along. He wrote the book to The Act, the Candor and Ebb musical with Liza Minnelli. He also wrote Precious Sons. He's also an actor. He was in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He's Woodcock, the little guy in the train car that they eventually blow out of the train car. That's George Firth. He really was an actor that was almost everywhere in the 60s and the 70s. Also was really he was in Myra Breckinridge, which is a very odd film with a lot of famous people in it. He was in Airplane 79, the one with Jimmy Stewart. He was just kind of everywhere in.
So you're at his house.
I'm at his house, and he literally had the original script to Merrily on one side of his computer, and the La Jolla script to Merrily on the other side of his computer, and he typed "Merrily We Roll Along, Act 1, Scene 1," and he said, "What should we do?" and they were used to having the director as the third collaborator in the creative process, and I learned more from Steve Sondheim and George Firth putting that musical together than I'd ever learned in a college class. And it's a very complicated musical. Structurally, it's based on a Kaufman comedy. It's about three dear friends, but it goes backwards. And so it's almost like a time machine movie or script where you have to kind of trace the elements, and there's fun things that you want the audience to figure out as they're watching the story go backwards, that they go, "Oh, that's where that started," that you actually saw pay off in two scenes before that. So it was a very sophisticated, complicated musical to get to work on. And I would say something like, "We can't change that because if you change that, you have to change all these other things." And they would go, "Well, we wrote it. We can change all those things if we want." So it was, and then I got to direct with Steve and George being there and collaborating on the production that I actually put together. Then that fixed version that I got to work on after Phoenix, it went up and it played in Seattle, and then it played at the Arena in Washington, D.C., and it originally arrived back at the York, which is now, we have dear friends at the York Theater now.
Yes.
That the York, I have an advisory board, honorary advisory board for the Sondheim Center, a whole group of wonderful friends who have all said that they'd love to come to Fairfield and perform or direct or create. And Jim Morgan, who is the artistic director for the York Theater, is on that board. He was connected to Musical and Musicals, the musical, which we did as our first touring show for our encore players. One of the reasons that we got Musical and Musicals is that I was able to tell Jim that I worked on Merrily, that you eventually got, and then after that, Sondheim said to me, Randy, you've become a huge fish in an Arizona pond, and you need to think about getting in a more competitive theater market. And I said, well, like where? And not to sound sacrilegious, but it was a little like Jesus saying, go be fishers of men. He said, well, maybe you should go to San Francisco. So I just picked up and moved to San Francisco, not knowing anybody, and Sondheim called some very fine theaters in San Francisco and said, hi, this is Steve Sondheim. I'm sending you a director that I just worked with, and he's really good at new work, at developing stuff, and you should hire him. And so these artistic directors at these theaters were so blown away that Stephen Sondheim had called them that they literally called me almost before I could get my resume out and said, Stephen Sondheim just called and said, we should use you. What do you want to do? And I said, anything you want. But because of Merrily, besides doing, I've always kind of been more geared toward contemporary musical theater, but I've certainly done my share of war horses. I've done Camelot a couple of times. I've done, I've done the big splash. I do a very fun version of Pirates of Penzance. I mean, I do big traditional musical theater too, but I've always kind of been in contemporary musical theater as a passion. And suddenly, because of Merrily, theaters were asking me to work on what they call new work. And so I was suddenly being invited to work with composers and lyricists and playwrights on musicals that were either new or were workshopping, getting ready to go to New York. And I worked on the musical version of Playboy of the Western World, which is Miami Lights, with Jacques Levy and Stanley Walden, two pretty famous New York composer and playwright. I worked on No Way to Treat a Lady with Doug Cohen, who is a really well-known New York. He's a triple threat. He writes the book, lyrics, and the music. Really talented guy. And then George did his one-woman show, and I did that with Judy Ivey, and then I did it with Gloria Loring the following year. And that really created this ability to be exposed to this creative process, which is workshopping new stuff, which is why I think I can get that to happen here.
With all those connections that you have developed, okay, you've been in Phoenix and San Francisco and working with all these people.
Well, the other thing that's just kind of interesting is then with Hawthorne, Hawthorne does nationally known infomercials and commercials. And so I got to work with a whole variety of really pretty well-known Hollywood talent, many of which Michael Corbett, who is the weekend host on Entertainment Tonight. He also has a show called Mansions and Millionaires. He was the replacement Kaniki in Grease, and did 2 or 3 musicals, and then he went into soap operas. He did 12 years of soap operas, and then he went out to California. Well, I've directed Mike in 2 or 3 infomercials, because he also hosts infomercials. We found out we had this mutual love of musical theater. He said, I'd love to come out and do something with you. Lisa Sims, who plays the mom on Phil of the Future, the Disney series, was Cassie in the original international production of Chorus Line. So a lot of the people that I've directed in television came out of musical theater, and so it's a chance for them to get to go do something that they don't get to do all the time. And because of other friends, I literally have been able to say, I'd love to get a chance to talk to this person. Does anybody know him? And it's such a blessing to be able to get directly to the person first. That doesn't mean that you don't eventually have to deal with a manager or an agent, but if you can actually talk to the person so that they call their manager or their agent and say, I want to do this. I mean, I want to make this happen. Uh, I have a dear friend in Steve Schott, who produces for me at Hawthorne, who produced the last Carol Burnett TV series and all of her specials. He produced the Jeff Foxworthy TV series. He produced the Bonnie Hunt TV series. By having friends that are at least willing to say that they know me, they know my work, that they support the vision of the Sondheim Center, and get me to people to at least be able to speak directly to them about a prospect. George Firth has one of the best address books in Hollywood, that I can call George and say, we're considering right now, we're trying to match celebrities into the shows that we're thinking about doing in this first season, and I'm able to get to talk to real people. I mean, it's where you talk to a George Firth or Steve Schott or Mike or Lisa, and they give you the home phone number of some, Michael Feinstein, who's very talented, probably one of the most talented. He kind of owns the Gershwin book he's been he played the Algonquin for forever, but he's a cabaret lounge pianist. He plays a grand and sings. And, the fact that you can actually have people give you very famous people's home phone number and say, tell them that I told you to call. George, I got very close when I was doing Peter Pan once to Neil Patrick Harris wanted to play Peter Pan. And this was after Doogie Howser, but before he started, he was in Rent for a full year, then he went to Assassins, then he did Sweeney Todd. Now he's really well known as a musical theater aficionado. He's now got a new TV series called something When I Married Your Mother. How I Met Your Mother. He's the kind of the snobby guy on that now. But he wanted to break into musical theater, and so he called George and said, they'd talked, I want to do musical theater. George said, well, Randy's doing Peter Pan. Would you go to San Francisco and do Peter Pan for free? And he says, yeah. And then the theater decided that they didn't want to fuss with he wasn't famous enough at the time, so, but I mean, that's how this happens, is it just kind of comes with dear friends who know that, you're not going to embarrass them by putting their friends in something that they would feel, embarrassed to be in. And historically, I've worked from the time I was in college till now, I've directed. And that's what I wanted to do. I was very happy to be an administrator and a director, but I've been able to direct my whole adult life, and that's why I have a dear friend in Natalie Sonder, who is the high school theater teacher at Ottumwa, and when they were finally getting their theater had been closed down for a while, and it was renovated, and it was finally going to open. And she wanted to do Music Man because it was the Iowa musical. And she was in a studio audience of mine, a paid studio audience, and she came up and she said, I don't suppose there's a chance in the world you would come out and just stage a couple of numbers from the Music Man for my kids so they can see what it's like to work with you. And I said, well, I'd be delighted. I'm happy to do that. So I went out and I did 5 numbers for her in doing the Music Man. And part of that reason is because I'm so blessed at the fact that I've been able to work in a field that's a very competitive, very difficult field my whole life, doing work I wanted to do, many times being paid to do work I would have done happily to just get a chance to do it. And that's so whenever I can share that with other people, I do a lecture dem that I've done a lot on how to audition for musical theater. And I usually tell the theater that if you want to charge an admission for that and keep it as a fundraiser for your organization, you can do that. I'm happy to just come and share how to audition for musical theater with you. And that's so I think that the people give so willingly to me. It's just kind of in an arena of just networking where you just give back because you've been so lucky to have the opportunity to get to do the work.
You just have such a passion for the musical theater and sharing, and I know that some of you are probably thinking, oh, great, you have this wonderful, wonderful person for the theater, but what about the rest of the building? Well, we're so happy because you were in Phoenix and you did manage and run another building, and you have proven yourself, and you do a lot at Hawthorne.
Yeah, well, I'm responsible administratively for all the television that Hawthorne creates, and that's we do we do infomercials with budgets of $350 to $700,000, and we do spots with budgets of $50 to $200,000, and I work with very capable, wonderful people that help me do that. But we build those budgets and we manage those projects and we bring them in on time, and we bring them in on budget. And so there's the administrative work that I've been lucky enough to do really does have an application to running the convention center and the arts center.
So we feel very, very fortunate to have had Randy be on our Fairfield Arts and Convention Center board and volunteer and form the Encore Players, and doing all this as a volunteer, and creating this honorary board of how many members? 15,
We're
20?
growing. We're almost up to 22 now, I think.
Of names that some you will recognize, but if you saw them, in a movie or TV, you would definitely recognize them. Connections galore, and the connections have connections.
Yeah, they're
and
very wonderful in their support of the
the New
program.
York writers and producers already visited for our opening of Musical and Musicals, the musical. And so when we recognized and saw all this talent, capability, and his passion for this, and his desire to step forward, my goodness, we didn't have to do a national search. We saved a lot of money. And
Well, and I can tell you that, for what it's worth, I'm getting paid a little less here than I was paid at Hawthorne. But I went home and talked to Margaret, to whom I've been married for 15 years, and I said, I really want to do this. And Margaret said, Randy, if you don't do this, you'll wonder for the rest of your life if that was supposed to be your life's work. You just need to go do it. And so believe me, I'm thrilled to have this. It's a little bit like climbing Mount Everest right now. There's so many things that we need to get done and need to get established. We're also going to be holding open meetings. We're going to be looking for people, obviously, in the future. We're going to be hiring people to come work at the Civic Center. We're going to be hiring a lot of people in various support capacities, but we'll also be looking for people specifically in the area of marketing, strategic marketing, development, fundraising, and we're going to be holding public meetings for anybody who's interested in getting to know us and the kind of work that we're going to be looking to do. Hopefully, trying to find some people that, at least while the building is still closed, would be willing to work with us on some kind of an at cost or in kind or volunteer basis until we get closer to opening the building, because right now all the money's going out and we have very little money coming in. But the idea is that we would be able to identify vendors and people that we want to work with once we're open, that we would then be in a position to hire. And so that's another area that the building is going to support local people, is obviously, we intend to keep as local as we can in all of our publicity and our printing, and there'll be a lot of that. And so we're trying to identify vendors, and those meetings are actually already scheduled. They're March 14th and 29th. And they're also at the meeting room in the library, and they'll start at 7 and go until they're done. We'll put these. It's been in the paper once. We'll try to get them in the paper one more time, and then this will be running here, and we can put it on FPAC. So if you doubt the dates of these meetings, we'll have them on your wallpaper thing that goes up. So
yes,
we can do that, right?
Yes.
And lastly, just the Encore Players, which last year they're our touring company that goes out to play in our feeder cities and to get people excited about coming to Fairfield to see musical theater. We will be starting the second year of the Encore Players. They're going to be doing a Sondheim review because we want to go out and show people how excited we are about having a building named for Steve. And so we're going to do a review of musical numbers from his musicals. We're trying to cast 12 people. We're looking at 6 males and 6 females. Everybody who was in the show last year has a slot this year. So there's 4 slots, I believe, that are filled. So we'll be trying to fill another 8 slots. That'll also be in the paper. You need to be available enough to be able to, travel out of town. Most everywhere we sometimes stay over a night on a Friday, but mostly everywhere we go is within a couple of hours of Fairfield. We rehearse locally. You do get paid. You don't get paid a lot, but we do pay for this. It's a professional company, so you get mileage if you travel, and we pay about $50 a show. And that's the beginning to form the professional company that we'll be founding. So if you're interested in musical theater and that's something that that you want to start doing, we will be doing the encore players again. We're trying to hold the auditions in about 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. So look for that.
So I hope that we've shared a little bit of who our executive director is and why we hired him. We knew that we would need to hire someone a year out. We've went beyond a year out of opening, and it's a little dangerous doing that because we need to be doing a lot, moving in a lot of different directions, and
fast.
And fast. And Randy's coming on board at this critical time, and also working with Andy Nelson, who's been for the last almost year doing little bits of everything, going off in every direction, laying a lot of groundwork. Now we're pulling things together, making definite decisions, coming up with rates, starting booking. You're going to be responsible for the whole facility.
Absolutely. With the help of a whole lot of wonderful people, but
Yes.
ultimately responsible.
Yes.
And as I said before, it's 472-2000. You can call us if you have questions, if you want to set up a tour, if you want to just come down and talk to us. Also, I'm rwest, all small case, RWEST, at sondheimcenter.com. If you want to email us with questions or comments, or come down and see us.
Yes, so thank you, Randy, for becoming our executive director, and he is, like I said, a ball of energy, and I'm sure that you'll be seeing and hearing lots more from the Fairfield Arts and Convention Center and the Stephen Sondheim for Performing Arts.
We hope so.
Thank you very much.